timeless singer.
That voice to die for, that incredible voice.
Could do things with his voice that I would have paid £1 million to be able to do.
Yeah, definitely glamorous, and I think you can't have too much glamour.
Billy must have got through, we're talking millions of pounds.
He was a legend.
He was a hell of a singer and a hell of a person.
One of Scotland's most colourful pop stars has been found dead near his Dundee home. Billy Mackenzie became a household name in the 1980s, fronting the band of the Associates.
Success doesn't mean everything, you know. So that's all I'm saying. I think it's good to sort of build things up and rip them apart once you're successful. No, just like a sort of Lego set.
There was this sense that Billy was always the man who would be king, you know, who would have been the king of the music industry, and there will be no one more famous in the world than Billy Mackenzie and stuff like that. But that's kind of what other people expected for Billy, you know. What Billy wanted was a completely and utterly different thing. In retrospect, the three greatest passions in Billy's life were his family, obviously, his music, and his whippets.
Even dogs who know wild.
Some people like darts, some people like porno videos, and I just happen to like whippets and dog racing, and he's quite human, he breeds whippets, you know.
Free milk on the WHS, Whippet National Health.
I was a wee bit 13-year-old when I first got his first dog. We lived in the centre of Dundee, and we'd go up to his house and have a walk with his dogs and things like that and exercise them. Well, he was very interested in that dog, and then, of course, he wasn't happy with one dog. He had to get two. He was rooted with his whippets. Very dedicated to his dogs. If you shouted at them, he was very hurt. He loves his wee family, he loved his dogs. Billy himself, I don't think he had his 100% of art and music. I think he would have been better being a veterinary surgeon myself.
Cat's a cat for an act, especially when it's under a light.
There were 6 of us. Billy was the eldest. I would say Billy was like a father figure. We all really looked up to him. He was always singing. He used to sing in his bed every night and hum. We used to all shout, "Shut up, Billy," but he was always singing all the time. And even when we were younger, we were all aware that he did have a fantastic voice.
It was the Cubs. Yeah, we got up in the hall someplace, and I think it sang Edelweiss. Got a little badge for it, or a little star or something, that was about it. Well, one good thing about my upbringing, it helped so much because there was music around all the time, and on both sides of the family there was always somebody playing the bagpipes, or then there's somebody playing the spoons, or somebody played guitar, or somebody played saxophone, you know, so it was inevitable really that I was going to be a musician.
Dundee in the 70s was a hard place in every sense of the word. Friday and Saturday nights you used to get all these guys all coming in from the States, and it would just be like the Wild West, you know. You could actually time, you know, the kick-offs in some of the pubs, you know. It was like, it's 8:30, there goes the first table. So Billy was brought up in an atmosphere of violence, which obviously he absolutely hated.
I left Scotland when I was 17. It was extremely dismal, extremely boring, had a personality complex Scotland did at that time. So I just nipped on the plane and stayed in Hollywood, and used to go to the beach and eat a lot of ice cream and got married. Up there in a place called the Wee Kirkin on the Heather, it's in Las Vegas. So the pastor, or whatever you called him, he had a nail varnish and kept giving me the eye. You know, it was a bit like that, but you do things like that when you're 17 and bored.
The first my mum and dad knew about it was when Mum got a letter, and the girl that he'd married was saying, "Dear Mum, I want to come over and see you," and my mum was really a bit shocked, and my dad was a bit annoyed because he was so young as well. But we knew he'd come back.
In 1976 they came out of the east of Scotland. Born from the ashes of cabaret combo The Assorbic Ones, Billy Mackenzie and Alan Rankin, shooting now out of the double hit label, they are better known to you and I as the Associates.
I think we were pushing more boundaries than an awful lot of people. And sometimes we fell flat on our faces, and other times, thankfully, we succeeded. Bill was crazy. can remember at one time, before we decided on the Associates, Bill came up with, why don't we call ourselves Frenzy Mackenzie and the Mr. Odds?
The first Associates concert in Edinburgh, around about 1979, we'd heard about this band and just went along to see them, and it was amazing. It was just fantastic because it was so different from anything else around at the time. The vocal range and his delivery was just, oh, you'd heard nothing like it.
There was nothing quite like that around. I mean, I suppose the nearest thing you probably get to it is something like perhaps some of the more kind of operatic stuff of Queen, or the slightly more kind of possibly Brian Ferry or Bowie's influence in that sort of glam, you know, loungy sort of stuff. But he went much beyond, much further than that.
We both liked Bowie, and we were trying to get attention for ourselves. So we said, what can we do? Let's record Boys Keep Swinging.
It was such a cheeky move, just the idea of covering this song which had recently been in the charts and not asking for any permission for it.
And consequently Bowie's publisher phoned up and said, you've been a bit naughty, but I quite like the B-side. And we ended up signing a publishing deal with him. We were going to record an album. So it worked. Pretty dreadful record, but it worked.
When you're a boy, you can buy a home of your own. When you're a boy, land and drive and everything, you get your...
When we recorded The Affectionate Punch, it's just myself and Bill and a session drummer. That's what makes up that whole album. And it was great fun. We just never stopped. And the ideas just came and came and came.
The Affectionate Punch!
At the time that they started recording the singles that would make up Fourth Drawer Down, I mean, the Associates were basically skint and living off their wits, which was no problem really for Billy. And it was a really sneaky sort of situation, basically. They had record companies who were interested in them at the time, who would give them demo time or money to record songs. The Associates would then go into Morgan Studios in Willesden, record new songs, give the record companies old songs, sell the new songs to Beggars Banquet and pocket the dough.
Go and have some breakfast and think about doing it the following week. It wasn't really a scam, it was just being productive, I think.
These sessions were rocket fueled, you know, to say the least. You can hear that sort of nocturnal paranoia in the songs, definitely the edgiest, oddest music.
Very, very experimental, and sometimes quite dark.
There's a lot of people that have been influenced and formed bands as a result of those records. That, to me, is the yardstick of success.
For a period in 1981, the Associates were kings of the independent charts, and they were releasing a single every 2 months and it would go straight to the top of the charts, you know, even though this was completely out there, left field music. In creative terms, Billy was tapped into the mains. People who have worked with him in the studio at that time talk about him as being like a firework ricocheting off the walls.
Recording Assault, that was like 7 weeks of just... everything was just going the way it should. Everything you'd been working towards, you know, you just hit it, and we both hit it at the same time, and the atmosphere was just charged, and everything before that had just been leading up to it.
Party Fears 2 it sounded as if it had been beamed in from another planet. There is no other way to describe it. It's like no pop writer before or since.
Party Fears 2, Bill and I wrote the beginnings of that and most of it, and certainly the piano motif and, you know, the structure of the song. I think Bill wrestled with the lyrics for a good 2 years before he was happy.
They're beautifully crafted as well. He never dashed them off. He spent a long, long, long time on them. He really did, but you never saw him labour over these things.
That became my early morning wake-up call for like, God, for that. I think that whole summer and on.
I think there was a real glamour to the Associates' music that came from that whole post-punk thing.
You couldn't not admire Billy as a vocalist. I think it was one of those rare terms that truly fits the word diva.
But this very individualistic style that spoke of something glossier and glittering and glamorous and special, I think. There was nothing mundane or miserable or depressing about his voice or the Associates' music, but it had this dark twist to it as well. It wasn't to everybody's taste and to everybody's cup of tea.
To break through as the Associates did was a major achievement. You know, as did Depeche Mode, as did the Human League, as did an ABC, as did a Heaven 17. And I'm not on Duran Duran or Spandau Ballet. Those were the sort of key groups in that period.
Everyone would be stalking round each other and then sort of maybe mouthing off against each other. A lot of bitchiness as well, I think.
Billy seemed to be able to swan into it quite happily. He certainly fitted in and would swan around the town, and we'd go out to different bars and clubs and things.
The early 80s was very hedonistic, you know, it was very lots of nightclubs, the whole London scene. The pop was about that. It was about that hedonism.
Yeah, we had parties, but I wouldn't put us in the same league as Queen or something. I think they really knew how to do it.
He was always kind of on the outside of it, really, even though he was in the thick of it. You know, he would suddenly then disappear for 2 or 3 months and he'd go back to Dundee or whatever.
A part of him did enjoy walking the landscape, you know, in Dundee, but a part of him must have loved coming to London and must have loved the spotlight.
He always, to me, seemed to be more interested with his dogs first and music second. One of his dogs had just had puppies, and Sarah, my wife, was in the studio, and Billy came in with a big overcoat on. And he came over to us, he went, "Oh right, hello," and "Oh, all right, Billy, how are you?" He went, "Oh Sarah, I've brought you this," and took out of his coat this tiny little whippet, and just gave it to Sarah. And as we were leaving, I remember saying to him, "Billy, look, that's really way out of order, but obviously I've got to look after it now, because there's no way Sarah's going to give it up. So what do I do? What do I feed it on or anything?" And he just said, "Oh, the best thing to give them is sardines." So I did for like the next 2 weeks. I was feeding the dog sardines, and it was disgusting. Its breath was disgusting. It used to fart it would just melt furniture. It was terrible. So I just thought, there's something wrong with this dog, it's not well. So I took it to the vet, and he checked it out and said, "Oh no, it's fine, it's a very healthy young pup." He said, "What are you feeding it?" And I said, "Sardines." And the vet just burst out laughing. He said, "What?" And to this day, I don't know whether Billy set me up on purpose or whether he did really used to feed his dog sardines.
Bill and his whippets. Double bed for Dempsey, bed for me, and the Z bed for Bill. And the dogs just roaming around in this other room, trashing the place. Bill was, he was banned from every Holiday Inn on the planet.
The Holiday Inn wasn't a particularly expensive hotel, and I think if we'd have tried to put them in kennels, it would have been just as expensive. So it was a sensible arrangement. Very practical, in fact.
13 in the hit parade, club country with the Associates.
For that little period in 1982, the Associates made Top of the Pops their own. Pure cheek, really, that's what was coming through.
The fault is, I can find no fault in you. It's all to say it, or I'll say it for you.
I think Bill, around the time of Club Country, is right on it. He said, "Oh right, okay, this is what you have to do." But I think someone like Bill is easily bored, and he's saying to himself, "God, am I going to have to do this to this camera for the next 15 years?
Club Country basically invented house music 5 years before Marshall Jefferson invented it in Detroit. And I mean, the hook, "A jive from nowhere leaves you in the cold, the refrigeration keeps you young," I'm told. And people sang along to this, you know. So, I mean, if the mark of a great pop record is that it's uniquely catchy and slightly dangerous, then, you know, Party Feast 2 and Club Country were certainly that.
Tell by the time 18-Karat Love Affair came out, he was bored and he was trying to do other things, and he was starting to take the piss out of Martha, you know, with the old heart and dragging it away and all that stuff.
Most of the bands were set to detonate because their ideas were very extreme. It wasn't like being in a group like NSYNC or Westlife. The idea was to rub against the grain, you know, that's what punk rock had brought. That sort of spirit of rebellion was still there in music.
They were completely different sorts of people who had a very good creative relationship, and that invariably requires friction.
We had a whole world tour booked, and we had recording in Nassau in the Bahamas booked for halfway through that, and then more touring after that. And Bill just said, "No, I don't want to do it." And he got in a taxi and he went home to Dundee.
Alan was quite prepared to go through the motions because he saw it as something that needed to be done, but the prospect of a 2008 tour of the United States did not appeal to Bill. He wasn't going to do that.
Bill said to me, he said, "Look, do you want to just record?" And I said, "No, I don't want to just record. I want to go out and do and live the whole thing." And we couldn't really go any further then. And so we had to split.
And I just got to be free.
When the album comes out, will it be under the name of Billy Rank? Billy Rankin. Billy Mackenzie.
Oh, Leslie. Thank you very much.
Billy Mackenzie or the Associates?
Yeah, well, I've got this thing about my name, you know, because it just sounds like a sort of sausage advert.
I can't even say it.
Yeah, it's like a sausage advert, so yeah, we'll be keeping the name, the Associates.
Well, I'd like to hear some of this album. In fact, your single. When does it come out?
Well, I suppose being a bit spoilt for choice, this was, you know, these record companies you can get. Well, mine's is called Warner's. Yeah. And I signed to them because I like Bugs Bunny.
He sort of arrived with a reputation. I was quite, I was actually slightly nervous about dealing with the Associates because their reputation was pretty terrible for drug abuse, eating money, like it was going out of fashion, and from a record company standpoint being quite unreliable. So when I actually first met Billy, I was quite disarmed by the fact that he was very charming. I thought that he was a bit of a genius, and we gave him, despite what you might have read in The Enemy, we actually gave him complete creative control. He had a successful run during Sulk, and then the record that I really worked on was Perhaps. And I really believed in Those First Impressions. I really thought that was a hit.
Those first impressions, they keep us guessing in all familiar ways.
I used to sort of allow him to get on and do it the way he wanted to do it. He always had a little twinkle and always had a kind of, "Oh, but Max, you know, it could be great if I do it my way."
All right then, Martin. Okay, we'll do it my way, the way. And I'd go, all right then. So I realised from a very early stage that Billy was not really going to take advice. Even when he was in a hole, he wouldn't take advice. You know, he really was more interested in doing it his way. He had a vision.
But at the time of recording, perhaps everyone involved says that that was really Billy's vision. You know, when he would record the vocals 40 times, producers were tearing their hair out.
Because ultimately, Billy didn't want to release the record. He wanted to keep on changing, and it got to the point where he would refuse anything to delay the release of the record, because ultimately he was afraid of it failing. He was, like all artists are, he was afraid of it not living up to the expectations of the previous records.
I think he thought he was doing his best work at the time. And I think he thought it was very commercial. I think he thought Waiting for the Love Boat was a #1 record. The British public didn't agree.
I'm sure the distress look just for rest. Waiting for the love boat, waiting for the love boat. Waiting for the love boat, waiting for the love boat. Knowing what you want and taking full advantage.
We both had this same criticism levelled at us, that we were both very individualistic, stylistic singers, and there were those that said we were the worst singers in the world, and there were those that said we were the best singers in the world, and I think we both felt an affinity with that. We had this love or hate thing with the public. They either loved us or they hated us, but there was no middle ground.
My flesh was all weak, my tango less than cheap, such grandeur to its core, and let me hear the restless soul. So take it to the ground.
I don't think consistency was part of his blueprint, really. I mean, it strikes me that he was like a maverick, really. You know, he was always chasing something. Maybe getting frustrated because he didn't find it.
Maybe he was just starting to understand that the world wasn't kind of designed for him to continue doing what he wanted to do unhindered, you know.
By this point, Warners were definitely winning in their battle to turn Billy into a bland, white soul singer.
I think it was later on when he kind of got a bit pissed off with you know, me suggesting that he should do Heart of Glass.
So in these videos he looked hellishly uncomfortable, particularly in Heart of Glass. I mean, he's squirming, really. I mean, he's trying his best, you know, because obviously he knows that if this isn't a hit, he's going to lose his deal.
He didn't like the camera. He thought the camera was a gross invasion of privacy because it looks right into your soul. I think we started to realise we had an affinity with each other because we liked playing live at that time and making records, but we still didn't really feel part of the music business.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
He was poor on TV, never looked relaxed. He was just impossible to get to do the things to make hits.
I think we had things in common because we were both difficult artists in a way. We both wouldn't do what the record companies wanted us to do. I think Billy was very much like that. He wanted to do what he wanted to do in the way he wanted to do it, and record companies tried to tie in with various producers, tried to make it work, and they just couldn't sort of harness it or market it.
He did a show at Ronnie Scott's, and it was not only brilliant, but he loved it.
I know what there is to know about the crying game. I've had my share of the crying game.
Between Warner's, Chris Parry at Fiction, his music publisher, and then after Warner's, Ashley Newton at Circa. I mean, Billy must have got through, we're talking millions of pounds.
But certainly during the Warner's years, you know, he liked Claridge's, he liked staying in, you know, in nice apartments and stuff. Which, again, why not? If you can get away with it, if you can get Warner's to stump up the dosh.
And Billy was an artist who was living the George Michael lifestyle, but selling maybe a tenth or whatever, you know, 25th of the records. Perhaps I'd only sold 40,000 albums. It cost $250,000 to make, but a major record company, you know, you're going to expect returns or the sort of George Michael size.
I thought Billy was an undroppable artist. I thought he was such a talent that as long as I was at Warner's, he was going to have a deal. So we exercised the option for what became the Glamour Chase, and the record was really never finished. It took so long to make and cost so much money. The financial regime and the chairman of the company at the time came up with the statistics on Billy, and it was pretty shocking. And we made what I found a very painful decision, which was to drop him. booked a lunch with him. I took him to Maggie Jones, which is a restaurant just round the corner from the office in Kensington. We had a very nice lunch, and he made it not difficult. And then he just said to me, he said, "Okay, could I have a cab?" And I said, "Sure," you know, and so we booked him a cab on account. And he took the cab all the way to Dundee. That was Billy.
You know, Zurich was a bolt hole for Billy. Boris Blank created these huge, beautiful soundscapes that were enormous.
Boris weaves magic in the studio, and terrific to work with. He gets the best out of me vocally, that's for sure.
Whenever Billy Mackenzie came to Zurich, here to the Yellow Studio, he was sometimes a little bit shy at the beginning when we have met first time, but also he has a very childish humor as well, and he always say, Boris, quick, yeah, okay, I get the new harmony now. And again, that was kind of so fast.
For him to guest on a Yellow record was like, it was like a mouth-watering proposition. It was at a time when people didn't do that. That was a new way of doing things.
I think there was a great sense of glamour for Billy, you know, travelling to Zurich. You know, even though he hated travelling there, he hated the fly. And you know, when he got there, he would be staying in these beautiful hotels, using the dry cleaning service and having really posh breakfasts and all this sort of stuff. And obviously, you know, he was there, you know, on one specific occasion, you know, for the recording of his song by Shirley Bassey.
And when she came here, Billy was so shy and kind of nervous, and when she started singing, he couldn't stay here anymore. He told me, Boris, I have to go out. I go for a walk and I'll come back in 2 hours or something.
You know that these tears have kept me awake.
No, it's thrilling, colourful, erotic, sophisticated.
The Rhythm Divine is probably the height of Billy's songwriting, and he did say that that was the one moment, you know, when he, you know, of total recognition, you know, for his aunties and his mum, you know, the fact that he'd, you know, written this song for Shirley Bassey, you know, everything before then had kind of just been mucking about.
Watching movies remind me of all of you.
Baby on the Outer National album was the only track which I have written, and he was kind of fell in love with this track.
But I must try and close my eyes and not see you. Oh, how I've tried. Oh, how I've tried. Oh, how I've tried.
You can't describe his voice, and you can't compare his voice with any other big voices on this planet.
Outer National, you know, was a great record for Billy, you know, even though it was the worst selling record of his career, creatively, it was brilliant. It was basically the soundtrack to Billy's life at that time. I think he was going to a lot of clubs and stuff like that, you know, leading a very nocturnal existence again. It's all the things that he loved about music, you know, it's really glacial, you know, it's European, it's detached.
I've came back to Dundee because I've learned to appreciate it for what it is. I've tried living in London, tried really hard, and I suppose it would help, you know, the Associates' career global-wise, but I don't think it's worth giving up what the city has to offer, and your friends and your family, things that I think are more important than just, you know, making a fuss. But
it wasn't because he had to get away from London that he had to, you know, retreat to the countryside. It was just because he loved it so much, and he was happy, and he just loved the fresh air. He loved being here.
He bought the house at the top of the hill, and we rather liked up there. We'd do a lot of writing there, and then down the way a bit, he had a house, a bungalow type thing, and he kept his dogs down there. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to the minister up in Octor House one particular day. He says, "You're that laddie who's got the berry on, it's always in that phone box up there." I said, "That's right." He said, "What does he get to speak about?" I said, "I don't know." But anyway, he was sitting there for hours speaking.
When he was living in Octor's house, he didn't have a tape recorder, and so he'd sing ideas down the phone and tape them onto my answer machine.
No, I never lost touch with him. He would always ring you up. Invariably, you'd come back and find your tape completely full of one call from him because he'd had an idea which he wanted to jot down, and he'd just whistle or sing this idea down the line.
There's so much you want to give, and so much you want people to hear, but still retain your privacy and your own personal life. I think that reflected in the way that Billy would always want to go back to the hills and the dogs, because that was his stable sanity area.
And I guess that perhaps he was afraid being a big star as well, and he would like to just protect himself as a human being on this planet with his whippets and with his nature and his kind of very romantic dream of Scotland. That was more important for him, the freedom.
He was incredibly open spiritually. He was never cynical about things. He would never write things off. I don't think he was ever staunchly religious, because that would have been too dogmatic. He was like a do-it-yourself spiritualist. I worked on the Glamour chase and out of National, and then when he was out of contract, he approached me to collaborate on a couple of tracks, and that was around about 1992. He was really unhappy with Wild and Lonely, and I don't think it was so much the songs, I think it was the production, and it was just a typical mid-80s sterile production, and he really hated it. Billy would always push you to your limits. He would use images to describe sound. He'd ask me to make a sound like the Sphinx, or an Egyptian pyramid, or a chord would have to be historic, or there are all these, you know, I've heard other people that work with him repeat the same phrases. I thought, oh well, he's used that with them. It's just sort of like a standard sort of test, you know, to see how you would react. He would just concoct scenarios out of, just for the hell of it, just to create a new dimension to an evening. For some reason, unbeknown to me, he told the producer that we're working with, John Vick from the Finney Tribe, that I was not only a psychologist, but a psychologist to the stars. And he explained my absence by saying I was in Barcelona administering to Annie Lennox, and that I was not available because I was busy over in Barcelona sorting her head out for her. But never let me in on it at all. So when I turned up, John Vick just said, oh, how did you get on in Barcelona? He was vain about his hair, because he had a receding hairline.
He found various ways around it. He put a beret on, or I think a wig came into play at some point.
Kiss me with your kiss, my life.
To sing like that, you have to know pain, I think. To be a great singer and to sing the songs of the type that Billy sings, you have to have this tortured soul, I think, and Billy was a tortured soul.
Don't you know your life? It's sad.
didn't want to be a torch singer. He wanted to be a pioneer. And that's why he wanted to do electronic music, because he saw that as the way forward.
I've never come across another singer who's got that much control over his voice as an instrument. Normally people seem to always get him in to do the big song and do his sort of routine almost over an empty space, over a blank canvas. And it was like, just let Billy Mackenzie be Billy Mackenzie in a space and it'll all come fine in the wash. And I think he actually enjoyed being directed very meticulously on this song.
You're gonna need me. It's the same in any language.
And to just be standing there like a foot away from him, kind of conducting him as he actually sang, was just a, you know, quasi-religious experience, frankly. You know, and it's kind of reflected by the intensity of what he finally did on that song. You know, it was just before Christmas of 1996. This was actually the last thing that was finished in his lifetime. And he was so positive and so fired and so, you know, so vibey about it all.
They won't love you like I do.
He was just the same as he'd ever been. Quite mercurial, quite up and down. And there wasn't anything to, you know, that would have aroused any kind of idea that anything was wrong.
He was very, very close to my mum. He adored her. She was so much fun. And even when she was in her 50s, she would act like a 20-year-old. You know, she was just so funny and great fun. And Billy felt so comfortable with her.
His mother took ill. And after she died, he really went within himself. And he just felt very, very depressed.
And then he became very agitated. And then he couldn't sleep. And he just wasn't thinking straight at all. And then he just got very disillusioned by life. But he knew that he wasn't going to be here any longer.
Then he just went blacker and blacker. And I was coaxing him to go out. And he took an overdose. By the time the end it was in kennel with dog, the dog kennel. And well, you can imagine the shock I got when I put my hand in. I felt his hand. And that was it, you know. Phoned for the hospital, but it was too late. He was dead.
He had a magical view on life, you know, and a very innocent look on people and life in general. And after my mother died, it just seemed to have all come crashing down.
There is a sense that he was let down in that life wasn't big enough for him.
What he crammed into his 39 years, probably most people don't get into double that.
I've had a hell of a lot of laughs in my life so far, but I've never laughed as hard as I did with Bill.
Pop music's about the moment, we all know that, but there are records that do stand the test of time, and I'd say that Billy's been involved in quite a few of them.
And hopefully Billy's death will make people rediscover at least Billy the singer, Billy the musician, Billy the maverick.